Hi everybody, this is Anne. I'm one of the administrators of the Pottery Studio group on Facebook. Recently someone posted a picture to our group. It was the coolest twisted triangular plate. I was intrigued by it but couldn't figure out how to build it. I challenged Jim to see if he could figure it out. He and I did some experimenting and not only came up with a solution to the problem, but using the same technique we also came up with several other projects we're calling stacked clay pottery. At first, I wondered if this architectural plate was created by stacking clay strips at precise angles then mitering the corners into triangles, but Jim designed an easier way to make it by cutting precise equilateral triangle templates to solve the problem. Now I had to figure out how to cut them and stack them with precision. The biggest problem is the elasticity in the clay. I couldn't afford any stretching or my angles wouldn't line up. To do this, I needed my clay to stiffen up. I rolled out slabs of clay the day before and let it stiffen up to leather hard. I laid out all the template pieces on the slabs. For the sharpest cuts, I knew I'd need to use an X-Acto knife. I placed a 1/4 inch thick straight edge piece of wood across the template edge. Using the very tip of the blade to cut with, I laid it flat to the wood and cut across. I seemed to get the cleanest and most accurate cuts that way. There's still a little flexibility in the slab at this point, so be careful not to overly handle it or you can risk stretching it out of shape. For the flat bottom of the plate, I was able to just use the center of one of the triangle cutouts, so I didn't even bother to cut that any shorter. I continued with the same steps for each template piece. For the construction, I laid a clean mat on the table and covered it with a piece of plastic wrap. I placed the flat bottom down first. I lightly scored the edge of the clay but tried not to interrupt the cut border lines. I brushed a little water over the scoring to make it sticky. I laid the smallest of the triangles over the floor without any gaps showing. I'm not worried about whether it's completely straight at this point. I used the template to make sure the sides and angles were still straight. Again, I lightly scored, then brushed over the scoring to make that sticky. I laid the next biggest triangle on top using the template to make sure my lines were straight. This time, I twisted it so the inner angles formed a stair step along each side. I continued this with each consecutive template piece, twisting it in the same direction over the top of the stack. Right now, the pieces are not fully attached and can still be adjusted. Now, this is what it looked like from my vantage point. I had 3 sets of stair steps creating the illusion of the piece twisting. Once I had it arranged just right, I placed a piece of plastic wrap over the plate. I placed a bat over that and flipped the whole thing over. Now I could adjust the outside edges so they matched up perfectly. I turned the piece back over to double check the inside one more time. When every corner's lined up, I placed a bat over the top and placed a semi-heavy weight on the top of that. The pressure will flatten each layer and help them to adhere together. Using that same template method, we wondered if we could work on any other shapes, like this kidney shape. Again, I cut out successive templates, but leaving one side stair step and one side flat. Now here's the piece those templates created. I just rolled a coil for the very top rim. It's a very unique shape. To finish the triangle bowl, I rolled a coil for the rim. I glazed it with Amico True Celadon glaze over the stair steps. I glazed the top coil with my white satin glaze. For the kidney bowl, I experimented with a new glaze I purchased called Amico Hibiscus Matte Glaze. I love the color and the texture, but it's so matte I might be afraid it would stain easily from certain foods. Let's continue with the more architectural construction theme. For this project, I thought it'd be fun to stack 2 colors of clay. I began by rolling out a 1/4 inch thick slab of my very white porcelain and a 1/4 inch slab of my dark brown clay. I laid a piece of plastic wrap down over top of each slab. I needed a small circular shape, which I found at the end of this water bottle. I collapsed the bottle and used that as my handle, and the opening became like a cookie cutter. I just pressed it into the slab and made as many cutouts as I could. I did the same thing to the brown clay. The plastic wrap tugs on the clay edges to bevel them and creates cute little buttons. I removed the excess clay and peeled them off the mats. For this project, I also needed a base to do my stacking. I lined the wall of this little Corelle bowl with a piece of plastic wrap and then cut out a slab of clay and pushed it into the bowl. If you want to see me do this, follow the link above where I demonstrate that technique. I also coiled the top part of the clay base and cut it so it was flush with the top of the bowl. I put one of the buttons on top of the bowl, positioning it with the front part sticking out, then cut the back edge so it was flush with the back side of the clay rim of the base. I'll use this button as my template. I laid the template over all the other buttons and made the same cuts. I scored and wet the top of the clay base. I positioned the buttons all the way around the rim, fitting them together along the sides and flush to the back edge. Once I had those in place, I repeated the same scoring and wetting, then laid down the brown buttons, offsetting them like bricks around the first layer. I needed to make sure that each button was connecting right at the center of the bottom button it was sitting on. When it was placed the way I wanted, I pressed down on each button. I continued with the same steps and pattern with the third row. It looks like a flower from the top view. From the side, it looks very much like decorative stones. At this point, I still have gaps between the bricks. I flattened out thin pieces of clay and worked them smoothly in the center of the bowl for a continuous wall on the inside. Here's one I made earlier, where I topped off the bricks with another clay base that I made from the Corelle bowl, just turned upside down. I used my finger and created a hole in the top and worked a rim on the end. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to glaze this, but added my white liner glaze to the top and the bottom bases. I added Amico Sky Blue to the bands around the buttons and left the buttons unglazed. The blue complements the dark orangey brown of the brown layer of buttons. I thought I'd use the stacking to try and create a gradation of light to dark colors on the pot. To start, I created an oval template as my shape. I began by rolling out a 1/4-inch slab of clay. I rolled the template over the clay to adhere it. I cut out just the outer part of the template to create a solid floor for the pot. I wasn't concerned about exact cutting at this point. I placed the floor on a clean bat. To speed up the process, I rolled out a 1/2-inch slab this time and cut through the template on the inside and the outside. I scored and slipped the floor and connected the slabs together. Once I had a solid white base, I wanted to start combining the two colors of clay. First, I rolled out a piece of white clay. I added a little bit of brown clay on the top and rolled that out. I cut the slab in half, stacked it together, and rolled it again. I repeated this step several times to combine the two colors and begin to get a veiled look on top. I rolled out the clay to a very thin 1/8 inch wide slab and cut out the template. Now here's what the edge of the slab looks like, very thin layers. I attached that to the top of the stack. I added a little more white and brown clay and continued with the stacking and layering process. As the piece got taller, I began thickening the width of the slabs and attaching them to the stack. Now here's one I made earlier, where I kept adding brown clay to the stacks until at the top I was just using brown clay, so the colors went from light to dark. Again, it's a good idea to dry it with a weight on top so the layers will stick together through the shrinking. When it becomes bone dry, then I can shave away any of the smeary clay to reveal all the layers. I glaze this with my white satin glaze along the bottom and Amico Clear C11 along the top stacked part of the bowl. I love how dark brown the clay fires to. It really makes it much more dramatic. By changing the way we look at hand building, where we're using clay as a more architectural building block, it really changes the way we look at the work we're creating. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.